I was working in a shipyard, what they call defense work, repairing ships, before I got my notice, draft board notice. When I was drafted, I was 24. I was like an old man, more or less, because I was in with 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. And I wasn't the only one. There was a couple other people in there, approximately my age. But it really didn't make much difference at the time, because 24 is still young as far as training goes. And like I say, you can endure what they give you. Well, I wasn't supposed to be called because at the time, I had 2 children, and they weren't taking fathers. So I don't know what category they put me in. But I got the notice, and I had to leave, and that was in May of 1944.
When he was young, he had a mastoid operation, and he had a punctured eardrum. He worked in the shipyard, and we didn't think he would go. He had 2 children, so we were really surprised when he did.
Let me say that anybody that came from a home family, home atmosphere, yeah, they were lonely. Same with myself. I didn't mind really going in, but like I said, I was more or less a family guy. I had 2 children already, and I didn't care to leave, but I mean, that's what we had to do. It was a long journey, and it was hot. I had the windows open, and it was a steam locomotive. And being that the windows were open, when the train was chugging, going uphill, the soot from the stack would come down, and it would go all over the guys, some of them with their mouth open. But that was an amusing part anyway. I wanted to say in the basic training, infantry training, South Carolina, for 17 weeks. We got down there, we were offered cold cuts, sandwiches, until they placed us where we belonged in the barracks. You were supposed to be physically fit already when they drafted you. They examined you at the time. You were supposed to be physically fit then. But if you weren't physically fit, you became physically fit, put it that way. But at the same time, they tested us for radio, and if you could distinguish certain sounds and stuff more than anybody else, in other words, they picked you out and sent you to what they called radio school for code. And I started training for that, along with the infantry training. It was part of it. But everybody didn't do that. Only those that were picked out, I guess. You always hear, you know, they're going to ship out, but you don't know where or how. So maybe halfway through that training, things were going so bad in the war in Europe, and they needed more men. And they didn't cut our training, but they put us all straight infantry training, took the radio part away, because like I said, they needed more men. The Germans had what they call buzz bombs, and they were like missiles today. They would fly over, and they were propelled by an engine. When you heard those motors, so to speak, you know, stop, the bomb was coming down. And this is what the people of England had to endure during that whole war. It was really a catastrophe, but I said they lived through it. They had bomb shelters and stuff, and they would go into them. Went to Southampton, England.
Okay.
And I thought we would be there for a while because my father was born there and his father was born there, so I was all ready to, to look up some people in the family, so to speak. Well, they changed my mind because they told us that we didn't get the amount of leave that we would have gotten if the war was in a different position. In other words, it wasn't too bad. We would have stayed there for maybe a month or so, whatever, and I could have looked up the people that I never saw and they never saw me, but I never got to do that. I went on the big ship, one of the biggest ships they had. They converted it. It was a cruise ship. They converted it for Army personnel, and it was the Queen Mary. Queen Mary I and Queen Mary II were ordered, in other words, to take troops across the sea. It took about 5 days to get across, but we arrived in Southampton safe enough. They had what they call corvettes. They were the English type of destroyer to come out and meet the ship for protection. Went into Southampton docks and we unloaded there, and we got into homes, you know, whatever, like barracks and stuff that they put us all up in, until we got our orders. And the fellas I trained with, not one of them was with me when I got overseas, because they split up in different whatever. And the captain, one of the captains had come in and said, you may not think so, but he said you'll be in action sooner than you think. We were shipped across the channel in these landing barge, and that was going to Le Havre. And when we got to Le Havre, we were shipped out of there by truck. Again, we headed into, which we didn't know even then, but we could hear the gunfire and we knew where we were going. And we're up and through the Hurricane Forest. And that was on what they used to call the Red Ball Highway. That took the soldiers from Le Havre and that into Germany and into battle zones, so to speak, you know. And that was up through the Hurricane Forest. That's where we went. And when you ask me where, I can hardly tell you where it was because I didn't know myself at the time. The people that went there before us, they probably had fought most of the battle in there, and we liberated a couple of soldiers that were stuck back in there from maybe the battle that had went on before we came. And at one point, the tanks came in with us, and we got to ride on the back of the tanks. We couldn't go inside them. We weren't a crew, but we were infantry with the tank.
Okay.
And up through the Hurricane Forest. In other words, you were supposed to try and be as careful as far as not being exposed to whatever, if there was any gunfire going on. And they had snipers in the trees that would shoot at you. But again, I said, when we went up through the forest, somebody had cleared most of that before we got into anything. And it wasn't a big battle area for me. After we did that, we had marched forward. We didn't know the land that we were on, so while we were taking these fellas, they had left and we went forward, and we just kept going after that. And as we went, we had Germans come out and surrender in back of us and give up. That proved that there was somebody there, you know, before, you know. And we were marching, but I told them go ahead, because you didn't know where the landmines were, and they didn't like that very much. Whether they knew where they were or not, we don't know neither, but I figured they would go before us. Instead of us being blown up, let them be blown up as the enemy, you know.
Okay.